like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the founders of the Saudi Arabia, to all of you that celebrated the founding day, a day that marks 3 centuries since the first Saudi state was established. In GTEL, over the last 2 days, we have heard many conversations, discussions, thought-provoking ideas and opinions from experts that are from different backgrounds and from over 20 countries. Participants joined us through social media and our GTEL platform and joined the conversation. Please share your thoughts or ask questions using our different social media outlets. Check out GTEL.sa for more information. I am looking forward to today's session, starting with a talk by Ms. Carrie Branjord from Illusion, our silver sponsor. Ms. Branjord is the Senior Vice President for Digital Transformation. She has focused on Illusion's work with over 30 system-wide, statewide, and countrywide transformations. Her roots in the higher education user group fuel her belief that the best results are always born of true collaboration between engaged user communities and committed solution providers. Ms. Branjord, please share with us your expertise and views on the future of higher education under the umbrella of e-learning. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And first of all, on behalf of Ellucian, let me commend you for this conference. It is an absolutely wonderful opportunity to gain perspectives from so many around the world, many of whom also utilize Ellucian solutions as the foundation for their operations. And I would like to also thank Professor Lilac of Saudi Electronic University. It is an honor to be here today, sharing in your commitment to digital transformation and quality education for all students in the kingdom. And thank you to BME for supporting this keynote. My remarks today are going to focus on the underlying technology that is required to run a modern university in 2022 and beyond. And so in order to start, let us consider the pressures we are seeing affect the tertiary education sector. The Vision 2030 plans include a focus on tertiary education to more effectively prepare students for the jobs of the future. This means everything from curriculum design to managing enrollments in disciplines to preparing students with practical experiences. All of these transformative initiatives will require access to data and to foundational technology that supports both the transactional administration, but also the record keeping and access to data for decision making. Now, before I go too deep, thank you for that very kind introduction. And I would like to share a little bit more. I have worked in higher education since 1998, and I've been at Ellucian for 11 years. Prior to joining Ellucian, I worked for the University of Colorado and the University of Minnesota. And my variety of focus areas have been in using, user experience, program management, enterprise computing, globalization, technology strategy, enterprise architecture, and digital transformation. And in my role at Ellucian, I've had the pleasure of meeting with thousands of customers, and I've been to the Middle East region many times. Ellucian itself works with over 2,700 institutions worldwide and approximately 100 in this region, including 16 of the public universities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. More than 1 million students are supported in this region each year, and it is through this experience and expertise that I personally have the ability to consolidate some of the trends that I see in global e-learning and where I gain my knowledge about the pragmatic considerations that I will put to you this afternoon. Students are becoming more and more like consumers in their attitude. They have access to social media, e-commerce, and digital government. Students have an expectation that they can conduct business online. This includes both learning and interacting with the institution. Students have expectations that the institution will also prepare them for life and for the workforce. They want learning opportunities that are connected and based in sound evidence, scholarly knowledge, and pedagogy that is both time-tested and peer-reviewed. And they also firmly expect tertiary education to have reliable systems of record, auditable and supportive, that provide the foundation for innovation, that facilitate the interactions with the university to ensure they can enroll and register, get the right level of advisement, interact financially, produce a transcript official record of their learning that is recognized at home and around the world. Let us consider this. Based on primary research conducted by Lucian, we know that 97% of students tell us that technology outside the classroom is just as important as that which directly supports teaching and learning. And 87% of students say that they evaluate the technology they experience as they are applying to university to evaluate which university to attend. Granted, the application may be using the unified portal to actually apply. However, they will also be talking to other current or recent students, searching social media posts, exploring university websites, etc. And it is also the sad case that 40% of students say that dealing with administration interfered with their study time. The answer to addressing all of these issues and concerns is digital transformation. And while I know that you are all immersed in digital transformation concepts, I want to define it here for the purposes of this discussion. Tertiary education is undergoing rapid changes. We know that with our heads and with our hearts. Sometimes we are personally driving it, sometimes we're feeling it. Nearly 20 years ago, Ray Kurzweil published the following in Perspectives on Business in May of 2003. We're entering an age of acceleration. The models underlying society at every level, which are largely based on a linear model of change, are going to have to be redefined. Because of the explosive power of exponential growth, the 21st century will be equivalent to 20,000 years of progress at today's rate of progress. Organizations have to be able to redefine themselves at a faster and faster pace. This was a general statement, and yet if we look back over the past 20 years, we see he was correct. The technology has changed, the processes have changed, the people have changed. And in order to take advantage of the progress in those areas, we have figured out that you must engage in digital transformation. You must marshal the people, processes, technology, and data in order to embed that change, use it for good, and not be run over by it in the process. Every change is either an opportunity or a threat, and I want to grasp the opportunity that presents itself to us. I think it is important to keep in mind that people are the product of higher education. They are educated citizens, the workforce and citizenry of tomorrow, the foundation of our economies. So investing in the process of education and the technology that underpins it are truly investing in the society of tomorrow. And that means we need to produce graduates who are ready for exponential change. And their expectations are that we will do so. So what does that mean for tertiary education? It means that we must adopt an operating model that unites people, process, technology, and data in pursuit of a goal or an outcome. Some of the ideas I'm about to discuss will be initiatives you already have in flight, and some might be areas you have decided not to engage in, and some will be new areas to consider. But all will require the use of technology to ensure that innovation remains efficient and cost-effective, in addition to meeting the changing needs of the student, the economy, and society at large. Now, the first example that I want to review is how to provide scaffolding for a student such that he or she is able to satisfactorily complete his or her program in the prescribed amount of time, making good decisions along the way. In order to move a student through their episode of learning that results in their qualification, be it an associate's, bachelor's, master's, or PhD, smart systems are required to connect the direct learning experiences, whether in the classroom and supported through Blackboard, or in practical work placements, or the engagement with the systems of record in order to automate the communications and engagement with the students. In this age of reduction in spending on education, we will see a tightening of advisor staffing levels, and we will need to make sure they are spending their time working with students at the right time on the right things. For example, it might be a special opportunity to do undergraduate research with a superstar professor that only a subset of advisees would qualify for. Or it might be students who are at risk for failing to progress that need special tutoring. Smart systems will be able to sift through the data, evaluate the situation, and target the interventions. Further, the data can then be used to evaluate the efficacy of the interventions and do more of what works and stop doing what doesn't work. We will come back to both ideas around data and around cost effectiveness. But for now, continuing with the student is now a student for life. There will be continuous learning, and portability is more important than ever. It is likely that the population will need the foundational education that you offer during the 5 years after secondary education, and then will need episodic refreshes of skills and knowledge. For years, we've been hearing that the jobs of tomorrow don't even exist today. When I started my career, user experience was a nascent discipline. Now it is ubiquitous. Data science has evolved from statistics and computer engineering and is now a discipline of its own. I am the Senior Vice President of Digital Transformation. Do you know the first mention of the term was in late 2011 by Capgemini and MIT, and now you can earn a master's in computer science and digital transformation? You get the point. The fourth industrial revolution is driving a change in how we educate our students, how frequently, and in what subjects. So what does this require? It requires systems that can follow the student through each episode of their education and paint a single picture. It requires smart systems that can match new opportunities to the existing foundational experiences of a student or group of students in order to meet both the workforce requirements of society as well as the professional development goals of the individual. Now, we can't go much longer in this keynote without talking about student fees and economic support for education. Whilst the Kingdom continues to lead the world in public funding for education, and especially tertiary education, we can see the signs that fees are going to be invoked and that direct economic support will decline. The funding level that has been sustained for so long has surely been sufficient to enable universities to thrive on the strength of the quality of their teaching and research. This shift means that administrative systems must be capable of supporting the assessment and collection of fees, as well as the provision of economic support for qualified students. Without this ability, the economic engine of the university and the economy of the country will falter. Now, the pandemic has been a forcing function that drove significant changes in the tertiary education sector. Let us also be reminded that hybrid learning could well be here to stay, at least globally. And we discovered this, the strength of it, through the pandemic. At this point, nearly every institution I speak with is contemplating what 10 years ago was introduced as the flipped classroom, where large lectures were moved online and more active learning experiences were held in person. And as we enter the new normal, many classes will remain purely online with better access to virtual experiences that mimic the real world. Haptic feedback embedded in simulations, even from the dedicated physical learning environment of their home, will create meaningful learning opportunities. Another driver for online learning, centers of excellence can be established, and anyone in the country can have access to that learning. We'll come back to this in a moment. Now, suffice it to say, students are now discovering how they learn best. This is a return to the concept that students are consumers. They are learning how to extract the most value from the time and energy they put into their education. Remote and solitary learning is good for some. Remote project-based in a cohort is best for others. A mix of self-study and in-person could be the magic combination. And some will continue to deeply value the in-person within a learning community construct. The pragmatic consideration then is that you must have an administrative underpinning that will facilitate this new mode of learning. The system for registration must alert the student to the type of learning experience they will have. The syllabus from the instructor or professor should provide an additional explanation of what to expect and what resources are available to support the student. Assuming that the foundational system enables this information sharing, setup will take little time, and it will drive an experience in line with student expectations. Now, taking it one step further, every student interaction must be facilitated digitally. There will not be the ability to hand a student a form to fill out and then submit. And frankly, digitized PDF forms will not be okay. no student will believe that is a digitalized experience. And it won't be nearly as efficient or cost-effective for the staff. It certainly does not drive staff job satisfaction. And let's be honest, no one wants to do a half-quality job. They want to do a good job. They want to come to work energized to assist students in finding their passion and preparing them for their life work. To that end, every single interaction needs to be digitalized. The pragmatic consideration here is that, first of all, bureaucracy must be questioned. And if it does not further the mission or creates undue burden, it must be addressed. Options are changing the policy or process, or figuring out how to automate it completely such that it requires zero intervention. If you determine that the interaction is actually necessary, smart systems with strong workflow tools to enable configurable processes and approvals can really bring your virtual world to life. Combine this with video conferencing, such as we're doing now. Smart systems can provide early alerts and student success intervention recommendations, and you can support the virtual and remote learner. Not only might these learning experiences occur within the borders of the kingdom, but rather than sending students to study outside of Saudi Arabia, you might end up with students attending university in Riyadh or Jeddah while taking advantage of specific offerings at centers of excellence in other countries. While the academic policies and procedures are worked through, don't forget about the technology underpinning for how to make it work. There are transfer agreements and academic standards to uphold. And then you have to be able to include the coursework on a transcript, charge the appropriate fee for the transfer evaluation, provide the correct financial support for the student studying remotely at an overseas university, and make sure it satisfies specific degree requirements so that the student is not penalized in terms of time and progression. That all takes technology and it takes setup, but once it's in place, it becomes very efficient and meets the expectation of the student consumer. So combining several of these threads to form a picture, students and staff and academics want a seamless experience that will allow loosely coupled systems on the back end to appear in a single user experience. They want that consumer-like experience. And that means both how they see the digital world of the university or college, but also how the rules work. As noted above, the more bureaucracy that requires paper to accomplish a task, or the more disjointed a task is, the less consumer-like it is. Prada doesn't make you fill out a raft of forms in order to buy a handbag. And I'm not equating the value of a tertiary education to a handbag. However, I am saying that we need to make administration less onerous and more streamlined in order to allow students to focus on knowledge acquisition rather than navigating the institution. And this requires a user experience that supports seamlessness. It requires a single view that sees into the other systems that a student might need to engage. Consider this: a student might engage with a parking, registration, degree audit, classroom experience, lab, library, and housing application in a single day. And they should not have to log into each separately. They should not have to re-enter their information across each system. The way in which a student experiences the university should be through a single pane of glass, and it should be as smart as it can be. Fully integrated with open technology, a user experience that is both pleasing and efficient, that masks the variety of systems that you require to run your enterprise. Remove the seams for your students, the cracks between different departments or functions. You are looking at an example of this sort of interaction that unifies the various functions and capability any given persona might have to work with. Now, further, a student wants their educational records to follow them. It might be in the postgraduate professional development arena, and that student is taking courses to maintain skills. However, they might want to take classes at more than one institution simultaneously. This might not be a trend here yet, but we are seeing it in other areas of the world. Either a course doesn't fit in a student's schedule at a single institution, or the offering is full, or there is a center of excellence at an institution and an interdisciplinary degree-seeking student is looking to combine offerings from multiple institutions into a single degree. Any one of these requirements can drive the need to attend classes at more than one institution simultaneously. And all of this can be possible if the institutions are running the same solution as the system of record, similar to the way a standard has been set for learning management systems or virtual learning environments. In the state of California, the 115 colleges have standardized on Canvas by Instructure. The State University System of New York has standardized on Brightspace by Desire to Learn. In the Kingdom, Blackboard is the standard. We are seeing systems such as the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Ed, the South Dakota Board of Regents, Alabama Community College System, and about 30 other systems of education standardize on Banner. And this means that within a system, a state, or a country such as Ireland, the students can have the same administrative and support experience at each institution. It becomes frictionless, no matter what stage of their education, undergraduate, graduate, career enrichment. It enables movement from one institution to another. Perhaps the family gets a job in a different community. They don't have to leave their educational experience behind. Now, beyond supporting the student of the future, a system, state, or country that is standardized on Banner sees immediate increases in consistent quality across the entire sector. Auditable, reliable, and a foundation for educational innovation, this standardization is the basis for quality assessment. Better decisions are made, especially when it comes to what programs are offered. In Alabama, the standardization was specifically driven to inform which institutions needed to offer which academic programs in order to meet workforce demands for that subregion. For example, they were able to spool up programs efficiently based upon data. It has only been a couple of years since they went live, but they are now crafting more effective funding requests, and those public funding requests are being granted because the data is reliable. Now, I mentioned that we would return to cost effectiveness earlier in this talk. More and more frequently, we are seeing shared services as a way to solve for cost pressures. The analyst group Ovum did a study a couple of years ago that is available for download on the GTEL platform. The focus of their study was to understand the cost savings as well as the mission-driven benefits of running standardized student systems in higher education within a system, a state, or a country. The overall crux of their findings is that where it truly matters, institutions should retain autonomy. These are in areas of research and scholarly pursuit, academic policy that supports the local community, course offering decisions to address local economic concerns, etc. And where differentiation does not yield a better outcome, systems, states, and countries are increasingly pooling their purchasing power and creating internal communities of practice that can interact with global communities of practice. They are engaging in shared services in areas that support students that are not competitive in nature, such as managing international student compliance or processing transcripts or other bureaucratic endeavors that are more important but are not important to the autonomy of the institution. It may be that as fees are introduced, some of the processing could be shared. Again, this is at the discretion of the community. It is possible that shared technology and pooled purchasing power is as far as a community wants to go, and that might meet the needs perfectly. It not only supports high quality education in a reliable and auditable way, but students get the common experience across the country, benefiting from the same decrease in bureaucracy and complication. It is possible that the other end of the spectrum with full shared services is also desirable. In some cases, digital transformation begins with envisioning the art of the possible and analyzing where you need to be today, tomorrow, and the day after that. Now, let's turn our attention to data. Digital transformation is reliant upon the data. Enterprise systems have been good at processing transactions, but they haven't been as good at extracting meaning from that data until now. Now, with these administrative systems widely available, Ellucian, for example, supplies student information systems to institutions in over 50 countries and 2,700 institutions. Data is being increasingly used as an asset. There is increasing pressure on producing high-quality graduates prepared for the local workforce in the time required to meet the needs of the local economy. And there are many facets to that statement. High-quality graduates prepared for the local workforce in the time required, meet the needs of the local economy. Now, each one of those elements requires the ability to analyze data. Am I producing graduates? How many students drop out or fail out? Are they completing on time? Are they pursuing academic disciplines that will address the needs of the local economy? Are those graduates high quality? Do the local employers agree? Are these graduates prepared for the workforce? How many of them have practical experience as an integral part of the curriculum? How many are proficient in multiple languages? Are the specific demographic groups graduating at the right rates? You get the point. Once there are so many questions to be answered, and data is the key. And once you have data in the system, you can begin to dive into programmatic improvement for the institution. You can understand where scaffolding for students needs to be strengthened. Do tutoring programs work in your environment? What could make them better? How many students could graduate on time if you offered one more section of advanced physics? How many students would qualify to graduate if you changed graduation requirements? That is a controversial question. And if you are planning to ask that question, you better bring data. Since data is only as good as the system that generates it, it is even more important that your institutions are all running on a sound, high quality, auditable foundation. Otherwise, you will not get the answers you need to come to the solutions that your country requires. Now, we've taken a broad look at some of the pragmatic considerations as we move rapidly into the future. Whether it is in a mindset shift to treat students as consumers, the move to online and hybrid education, the increasing openness to learn at more than one institution, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes across borders, the increasing need to pool purchasing power and drive standardization and technology across the country, the need for rich sources of data to provide answers to substantive questions. Remember that we are in a period of exponential change at this point, and by definition, that will grow exponentially. All of the thinking about how to teach differently is excellent and required. And the digital transformation that is required in order to support that innovation is of paramount importance. Again, thank you for participating in today's session. It is an honor to speak with such a distinguished audience on such a vital topic. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is to be commended for Vision 2030 and the accompanying initiatives that are driving the changes we spoke about today. I am hopeful that I have lent my voice to the discussion of how to accomplish the goals therein. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Haya Zaidan, an assistant professor in the College of Health Sciences at the Saudi Electronic University. I've been teaching and facilitating courses and training online in higher education for over 15 years. I'm very pleased to be here with you today as the moderator for Panel 5. As a member of the GTEL Forum Executive Committee for this year, I particularly had an interest to moderate this panel because I'm also head of the University Academic Advising Program and a member of the University Student Support Center and Mental Health Promotion Programs. So the student and learner's experience while using e-learning is becoming more and more a topic for discussion and exploration, especially in light of COVID-19, as there's been a significant shift in the ways we work and play and engage with at our fingertips using the multiple devices and the technologies. And learning has moved out of the formal classroom, has become integrated in all aspects of our daily lives and in this digital age. We need to think more, reflect, and what we can do to enhance that and increase our gains while minimizing any negative effects. So I'm very, very honored to have with us today on the panel Dr. David Marshall, who is the CEO of Beyond Campus, Dr. Kiko Suarez, who is the Vice President for Higher Education and Workforce Development at Territorium, Mr. Oleg Figlin, who is the Vice President for the EMEA region for Blackboard, now known as Anthology, and Mr. Samaroy Gabita, who is a founding member and general manager for Human Logic Software. I'm very glad to have all of you with us today on the panel. Shall we hear from Oleg first, please?
Absolutely. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Dr. Haya, first of all, congratulations on an amazing event so far. I'm speaking from London today, but I had the pleasure to be physically in Riyadh 2 days ago. And I think that you had a really good start and it's a really world-class event. So congratulations and thank you for having me on this panel.
Thank you. We're honored to have you with us.
Absolutely. First of all, what I would like to talk about is I think the topic becomes very present for all of us during these days. And I would like to talk about, first of all, some global challenges, what are the solutions, and really gradually try to give you some perception or some better background. What are we doing it, and share some best practices from other institutions around the world. I'm managing Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I meet with clients almost daily. And I think definitely what's going on in Saudi Arabia with institutions, in many cases, you're ahead of the curve. But at the same time, there is still a lot we can learn from others. So talking about e-learning experience in general, we moved a long way over the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic time. And and we had to adjust very quickly. But at the same time, I think some of the trends that we can start seeing these days is that many institutions try to catch up and really make sure that we adapt to new technologies very quickly. What happened when we look at the global challenge, that when you, as an institution, you start catching up, you try adopting different technology, different tools, and gradually it becomes quite messy, what you can start seeing. The communication becomes quite complex because you have different stakeholders. The updates becomes very challenging. And most important, I think previous speakers talk a lot about the data. The whole data exchange between different systems and infrastructure becomes even more challenging. But I think one of the I would say challenges that most of impact is our students, because looking at the educational journey these days, it becomes probably even more challenging than ever to understand how can I progress through my studies. Students need to make intentional decision about how their lifelong education journey prepares them for or advances their career. The education journey really offers many pathways, and how can I, as a student, choose the right pathway for me? What provides me the best experience, and how can I be the most successful? And I think these are the trends that we start seeing these days. At Blackboard and now Ontology, we can support students in their journey, and we can help institutions to think differently. about how they prepare their systems of education as they're introducing and helping students through that process. And that's what I would really want to touch base today and present to you some of the solutions, what we see and how we believe the industry is moving these days, and also what we can actually learn from other industries that went through a similar journey. I would say, talking on a high level and talking about the solution, there are probably three key components. First, you need to have the right platform in place that enables communication across all channels, all stakeholders, and in an equitable way. Second, we need to have data. Data becomes more important than ever because we use data, we leverage data in order to personalize student experience, especially when it comes to online education. Every student has unique needs, and how can we make sure that, especially if we don't see our students on a daily basis, how we can really personalize their journey and make sure that they get the most out of it. And last but not least, are people. We can have the best technology in place, but if we don't have people with the right skills, probably this technology almost going to be useless. So I would really like to touch base on all these topics and make sure that we give you some insights. Let's start with what institutions are looking for these days. Institutions are often focused on three core areas to support their practice, their business, and learner success. First, they engage in students. I think it's pretty obvious. Staff members are engaged in helping students to succeed by connecting them, advising, advancing them along the education journey. Second, they're providing learning experiences. And finally, they're focused on how they can operate efficiently, how we can do more with less. I think it's probably familiar to many of us, how you can optimize our processes and make sure that we're really making good progress. As an institution aspire to optimize these activities, they're oftentimes thinking about how they can connect the data from those experiences. But learner-centric institutions, they have a little different approach. So to truly remove these boundaries of learner success, to truly remove these barriers, we need to think about the three systems. Those three key activities of engagement, of learning, and of operations, not as exercise in connecting all this data, but leveraging how the data blends across the system and embeds in all the workflows. And I would really like to highlight that it's really important to make sure that data embeds in workflows. It's not about integration. It's about sharing some insight from one tool and creating workflows where you can use this data, these insights, to create a better user experience. And in the engaging area, there is a CRM, and it's associated ecosystem of technologies that collect and drive data that helps to engage students in many cases. Needless to speak, we also have LMS, and that's where users or students normally interact with the system, learning management environment. They have an access to all the content, and where they can communication, engage. But also important that in operation area, which is the student information system, that's really beginning to think about how the data is helping drive efficiency. What we saw in the past, that institutions normally try to integrate all the system, but at the same time, becomes very, very challenging because especially in the last 2 years, as many institutions try to digitalize more and more, the number of systems grew, and it really becomes like a Frankenstein. It's very difficult to link them together, to leverage the insights. And in some cases, even if you connect them, it still doesn't allow you the right flexibility in order to create the workflows and user experience to adapt to these changes fast enough. And that's exactly what has been our focus over the last 2 years, to make sure that we define the ground up architecture, the solutions that they can really leverage insight from one place to another. Now, I would like to take us one step back maybe and have a look at, maybe take us 20 years back and have a look on how the industry really evolved over this period of time. Looking at the journey we've been on the education community, we have come a long way from the traditional experience. Education has been digitalizing for some time. We've seen an ongoing and massive deployment of online courses over the last 2 decades. However, the adoption of technology in education has been probably slower than in other industry. Probably if I compare to healthcare or retail, probably 5 or 10 years ago, when you go and you purchase something online, the whole experience actually was adapted and built for you. So it made you very, very easy. In education, when it comes to education specifically, we didn't have enough insight, enough data over the last decade or so that we could confidently say that we can really learn on it, based on it, and adapt user experience based on this data. However, what we saw over the last 2 years and the trends that we saw with COVID-19, we saw a rapid shift to remote instruction due to the pandemic. We have now seen in education came to a critical mass of users engaging in a digital platform, which means we have enough interaction, enough insight, and enough data to start relying on it and building a personalized experience for our students. Almost overnight, education experienced a move from fractional participation in a digital environment to essentially all users in a global education community engaging in a digital platform. This growth in usage created a potential to now harness the data to deliver personalized experience. And that's exactly what our focus been at Blackboard and now Ontology over the last couple of years. We restructured our entire architecture completely so that everything that we build, in regardless which tools, which solution it is based on the same architecture that share the same data. Then once you have the data architecture in place, we need to make sure that it provides the right capability, and this capability then explores some kind of user insights and create a personalized experience. And I can give you one example. Many of you are familiar with tools like learning management systems or Blackboard Learn and the Blackboard Collaborate. And where we are going these days, for example, once a user interacts in Blackboard Collaborate, our virtual classroom solution, we want to make sure that we have data from Blackboard Learn and it automatically feeds the instructor and tells you who is being more active, which are the students that I need to pay more attention to. They might be more quiet, they haven't participated in the discussion forum. And when you interact with them online, you might also maybe bring it up, a challenge, or ask them questions and engage better. So that's just one example, but I think that's the directions that we are currently going in order to expose this insight and make sure that we really try to make sure that we provide this personalized experience to our students. Last but not least, we touch base on the platforms, on the solutions, and we talk about the data in general. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's all going to be quite useless unless we have the people with the right skills to leverage this data. So how do we prepare for academic community for technology evolution? And I think that's important. And we also realize, especially over the last 2 years, it's not enough for professor or for lecturer to shift from a classroom teaching to online and leverage exactly the same approach and same methodology, same practices. You really need to know how to interact, how to engage with students, how to leverage the platform in the best way possible. And that's why I must tell you that we've been very successful over the last 2 years, especially with digital teaching and learning series, where professors, instructors can gain access to professional development. The teams need to deliver high quality teaching and learning with technology. So we developed really a world-class professional development where we can certify school teachers, K-12 teacher, higher education academics, and staff in the use of digital technologies. And I'm really happy to let you know that we have more than 20,000 certification awarded over the last couple of years. Actually, we have had quite a good success in a kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's something that we still plan to do, to roll out to multiple institutions. There is still definitely a way to go. But I think now we came to a point where over the last 2 years, everyone tried to catch up with technology, trying to do what is right and make sure that we can provide experience. Now the question is how we can perfectionize it to make sure that we really raise the bar and standard and use it to the best extent possible. So, I hope you got some ideas, and over the last probably 10 minutes, I tried to present what are the key challenges that we see at Blackboard and Ontology, how we tackle these challenges with the platform, with the data, and with making sure that we provide the best-in-class technology and education or professional development for instructors. Of course, there is a long way to go, and we've been pleasure to working with many institutions in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia over the last 10 years plus. And we are really looking forward to engage and see how we can take this experience to the next level.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. Shall we move on to Samaroy next, and then we'll take questions at the end if you don't mind.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Haya, and thank you, Oleg. That was a great presentation, and I'm really honored to be part of this panel, and I would like to share a few things with you. And let me just try start with sharing my screen with the a simple presentation. So what I'm going to talk about right now is something which is not specific to products, not specific to technologies, but in general, taking the learning experience beyond technology. So me myself, I've been with sorry, I'll just go back a couple slides. I think I clicked too many times. Yeah. So I've been with the e-learning industry for now 21 years. So that's a pretty long time. So back then we had to convince people on what's e-learning, and we also had to go through a few things like, we always had to go to the faculty members, the teachers, trainers, professors, and tell them that this is not something that's going to replace. Now this is going to be your supplementary learning, which is going to enhance the experience. From there to where it's really essential now, and it has a long journey, and it's in a really great place where it is indispensable. And now we're looking at how to improve the experience and what's the need of the hour. So what I mean by beyond technology is basically what are the trends right now and how are we addressing those trends. So that's something that I want to speak about. So I'm just putting in a few buzzwords, because every institution we know they go through specific technologies. Everyone has a LMS, everyone has a MOOC platform, everyone has a student information system. Then everyone is also having the virtual classrooms these days. So and then that has become indispensable, and it's a part of academic learning or corporate learning or your professional training and upskilling. So in everywhere that we're learning is happening, we see the e-learning as indispensable, and it's more of a enhanced experience for the learners anywhere, anytime, and also in terms of how we have seen the pandemic pan out. It's been indispensable as well. So in the specific areas of corporate learning, let's say in corporate learning, we've seen what we've seen in the last 15 years has been that everyone had the courses, then people had to take specific courses which are or even to upskill. They had their KPIs, they had objectives, they had a specific skills gap analysis, then so on and so forth, where it was more of a HR function to make sure someone had to have the right skills or had to have certain courses or go by the compliance of them. So it's from there. Now today, learning has become more enjoyable. People are actually learning on their own. They have their specific interests in how to go about their learning, and we're talking about peer-to-peer learning, and we're also talking about learner engagement. So where we're speaking about people posting something that's very interesting that they find within their organization, outside, or within their university, within their even in the community, so on and so forth, where they find a specific topic or a specific learning that they find interesting, that they post it, and then they expect everyone else to learn also, and then and people are collaborating to put together learning. So what we're speaking about here is not only academic learning that happens in a formal way, but also informal learning that happens through peer-to-peer. And this has been encouraged even in universities, because there are these groups that they form, the students. It could be technology group, it could be business groups, or it could be based on their majors where they look at a specific learner engagement. And we've been focusing on implementing artificial intelligence over all of this and trying to portray certain trends on what the people are interested in and what should be given to them for learning. So it could be that someone is using Blackboard, someone is using Moodle, someone is using some other platforms, and it could be because the data points are from every platform, every technology, and every way in which it could be OpenEDX, MOOCs, and so on and so forth. So essentially, we can build the peer-to-peer learning and learning engagement platforms using AI for all of these. And then based on which also we can drive the learning outcomes for academics, where course learning outcomes and program learning outcomes have been the traditionally ways of measuring how much and what you have achieved over a period. Then, however, these could have certain elements that are actually learned informally. So you would have covered something which is beyond what's being taught in your university. So we always look at certain outcomes that are coming in from the course of the university, but however your participation, your engagement, and your certifications that you have done outside, or your participation in some of the seminars or events, or your showcasing a specific project that you have completed also accounts for your contribution towards your learning outcomes. So that's what we're focusing on, actually building an integrated layer between all the various tools that we have. So we do have LMS, we do have SIS, we do have MOOC platform, and then we also have certain informal learning. Then how do you collect all this information is key to what we want to achieve these days. Then what are the current trends in learning technologies and what's being focused as well, just to see. So on top of all of this, when we have all of this, how do you build it right? So how do you build it right is basically based on academic platforms having competency-based learning, where even though you have a number of courses, probably you might want to club them, you might want to split them, you might want to attach them in a way that actually is linked to a competency which actually is required by the industry. So the industry is providing the employment opportunities. They're actually looking for specific competencies which could not only be completed by specific completion of certain credit hours or certain courses. No, it's more about how competent are you in an overall position for the kind of a job role or the kind of an opportunity that we're looking at. So it could include your communication skills, to your technical skills, to your social skills, and everything put together. You'd be an individual. So that's where we all have gone through the university requirements to all the electives and so on and so forth, and we've done great study. However, the representation of what we've achieved is something that's very key to someone who's trying to make you employable. So that's where competency-based learning has gained traction in the last 4 or 5 years, I must say, and it's actually being implemented currently with most of the leading universities. Then we're also talking about student portfolios. That's a great way of representing how the student actually carries what he has done within the university, outside the university, and through other systems as well, and how he's actually being able to represent. So I go and say, hey, here you go, this is my portfolio, and this is what I bring to you, and then this is in entirety what I do. So essentially that's more important for a student to be carrying. And then implementation of student portfolio systems is something that we've been carrying out for the last 4 to 5 years, as and when the e-learning and trends in e-learning have become more standard. So it's become a common practice that everyone has an LMS, everyone has a MOOC platform, and people keep learning from informal, formal, and virtual learnings. Then you have a great opportunity of data through which you can build a full portfolio for the student that they can actually carry with themselves, and then they can represent themselves, showing the full portfolio, which could even include their extracurricular activities, like their sports activities, to your hobbies, to your talents that you've showcased within your university as a part of your portfolio as well. Then we're also looking at, as I said, some of the profiles that you can build for your employability skills, which are also recommended by certain AI trends. So this is something that we are specializing on in terms of building data-driven AI recommendations for non-academic learning as well, because every student academically is actually going through a cycle of courses and completing his academic requirements, let's say. But then, however, for his employability, he might be requiring to go through a specific set of non-curricular courses as well, and skills development, which can be recommended because we understand his portfolio, right? So that's the whole. So we're talking about learning experience platforms that kick in. So there are multiple learning experience platforms out there today, and it's been every platform has a way of how to determine and how to club the data, and how do you actually present it for your employability skills. That's something that we've been implementing for a number of universities, and also in collaboration with the major employers of the countries. So we've been working very closely with the large universities and the employers as well, and building a bridged platforms where they're able to actually see the trends that are of the students and their skills and their portfolios that are coming out of the universities, and then being able to pick the right workforce that is tomorrow ready. So that's been our focus, and this is more about speaking on the front of what we are trying to provide. As I said, we always focus on being technology or product agnostic, and trying to implement something that's leveraging the investments of major, it could be universities, governments, or corporates, and so on and so forth, where it's more about the data and what you do rather than the technology itself. So that's what I wanted to present, and also in terms of bring some of the trends into notice in this through this great conference that we're having right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very, very interesting. Just thinking about the potential there. If I may move on to Dr. David, thinking more about the design aspects.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am joining you all from Denver, Colorado today. And I am sure I would much rather be where any of you are, because currently it's minus 17 degrees Celsius here outside. It's very cold. So I am sitting inside where it's nice and warm, and very honored to be with you all today. I will start my screen for everyone. And as I do so, I really would like to focus, the Beyond Campus Innovations that I run, the company here in Colorado, is really focused on that learner experience. And we do a lot with instructional design for our partners around the world. And, both the speakers, both Oleg and Somaroy, have talked about all the different solutions that are being bundled together today. And one of the things that, as we talk about the experience and designing experience for the student, for the learner, as well as the administrator, I would just say we can't forget the human element. We can't forget the person behind it, because we have so many amazing pieces of data. We have so many tools available to us today. It's very easy then to forget that we're still talking about individuals and human beings. And as we look at that, there's a concept called change management that most consultants will try to offer to you as part of their packages, to say you have to have an element of change. Well, that is very true. We need to have an element of change, but we have to design what we're doing for students and our staff members with the idea that change is all around us, and it's something intangible. It's not something we can touch and feel, but it's something that is always with us. And in this day and age, in today's world, it's accelerating. So my contact information is in the slides. I won't tell you much about me, but please feel free to reach out to me by email, phone, after this presentation if you have any questions. And just a couple key points I'd like to share as we work with our partners and clients around the world, including the Kingdom, is that learning in an online environment is fundamentally different than a classroom setting. And I think because just inherent in the nature that we're all sitting here in this type of community of learning right now, and what the GTEL is providing, we all agree with that, that learning is fundamentally different. But what we have to remember is not everybody understands that. When we get back home, when we talk about using our subject matter experts, our professors, our great staff members, they don't always understand that the fundamentally e-learning is different. And so inherent in that is the idea that if we agree to the fact that online environment is different, then we have to design our courses differently. We have to design our experiences differently for our students, for our learners. In that design, when you talk about doing something differently, it has to be very carefully considered. So you can't just allow it to individuals. You need a systematized process by which you go and embrace change and introduce change into people that have done things the same way for years. And the academic world, higher education institutions, as well as all the way down to the K-12 world. People have been doing the same thing the same way for dozens, if not hundreds of years. And so we have to remember that change can be hard for them. And that's administrators, instructors, designers. But what we can do as administrators and leaders in this area is to lead the change. We can be the ones to introduce these principles as we go forward. And that's important. And it's important for each of us to realize that we have a role in impacting the lives of students and learners when they're involved with our platforms. Whatever the solutions are that we're bundling together and putting together, we have to always keep the learner at the center in the back of our minds and the way that we think of how we're doing things. One of the quotes that I like to constantly refer back to and use is this quote that says, "Change is painful." And I think we all can understand that. Change is painful. But nothing is as painful as staying stuck somewhere where you shouldn't belong. Somewhere you shouldn't belong. Now, in the last 2 years with the pandemic, a lot of students all of a sudden, instantly, as well as teachers, professors, were instantly somewhere where they don't belong because they were out of the classroom. They were out of their traditional environment where they were comfortable. And so how do you go and change that? We actually have a challenge in front of us in the e-learning world because the last 2 years have left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth because people use Zoom platforms. They used PowerPoint to replace online learning. And it's really not that they didn't take advantage of what the tools were in front of them. They just put a Band-Aid on things very quickly to try to fix things. So change is going to be even more painful for the next several years as we try to ensure people and help them understand that online learning can be engaging. It can be exciting for them. And that pain that they have felt for the last few years, we have to show them that this is where they can and do belong because we belong there. We wouldn't be here at a conference like this if we didn't believe that online learning was the right thing. So again, it's up to us to introduce the change to go implement this and help people understand how exciting and compelling, interesting, and really, truly powerful online learning can be. And so when we design, whether it's courses, whether it's full, 13-month programs, 13-week programs, whatever it may be, or 1-hour programs, whether it's for individuals, for in our business environments, or for students, change leadership has to include a strategy, especially related to online learning. We can't just walk into it, give somebody a tool, and expect them to understand it. I'm sure, as we heard from the earlier speakers, from Oleg and Somroy, they were talking about all the different things that we have you can't just lay that on top of people. You can't just share data with them. Everyone's mentioned data so far. It's so powerful, but to share that data without giving them a step-by-step guide on how to use that and how to apply that into their environment, it will be lost. So we have to be the leaders to introduce and help them with that. We also have to be committed to this journey. And the journey is towards predictability. So the nice thing with online learning is you can extend that same experience. Once you have a model perfected, you can extend that and it can become reliable. And that high quality experience can be transferred from learner to learner. And so predictable, repeatable. It's like if you ever took piano lessons, the metronome on the top of the piano going back and forth, it has to be predictable in that way because the students expect that. They expect to go from course to course to course, from class or online learning experience to the next one with expectations of experience that we have to make sure they are feeling as we go and build these tools for them. And then finally, the change management that we're talking about, that's really just a fancy word for saying the human element that we have to anticipate and design for has to be an organizational-wide approach. We can't allow each individual professor, each individual subject matter expert, or each individual administrator to build their own platform, to select their own tools. To have that standardized approach is a way that we create the predictability, the way that we present a process that is really consistent for that learner. And I keep coming back to the learner because they're the ones that e-learning is supporting, and we can never forget that. You know, at the beginning of our talk today in this panel, Oleg talked about the solution and looking kind of at the human pieces that are included in that. And I couldn't agree more. And what change management is, and with online learning, is we have to address a fundamental issue that each of us are facing. And that is, as administrators, as providers of good education and information to other individuals, we have to lead that effort to change online learning. But we have to start, as I've mentioned before, by giving our teams the right tools, the proper sets of tools. And you've heard some amazing tools today. I mean, whether you're using Blackboard, you know, it's an amazing tool, and they have different types of plugins and different elements to it that are very powerful. You can have great tools, but the challenge is you can have excellent people running those tools and giving those tools to excellent people. But if your fundamental process across your organization is broken, the results are going to be average at best. So the question is, we don't want average results for our students, for our learners. How do we increase that and get up excellent results? Well, if we have excellent people, what do we fix? We have to fix the process. And again, even though we're focused on people, we need to think, how do we give them the right tools and training and information that they need? It's out there, but as administrators and leaders in online learning, we have to be the ones to give them those tools in the right way and at the right time and with the right methods. And so if we can fix the process, that's how we get excellent results. We can't fix things with broken processes. And so excellent people generally don't get into education, into learning with the bad intention. And so knowing that, let's take advantage of those great intentions that we all have for online learning. And let's work together to go improve the student experience and learner experience, because we owe it to them to give them the best possible outcome. And I believe in the work that we do across the world and seeing all the good things that are being done as we share those in conferences like this GTEL conference this week or in other conferences, bringing that information is so powerful. But to go back to where I started, we can't forget the human element. We have to remember that there's a person at the end of the day behind the screen somewhere in the process, in this whole supply chain that's coming together to create online learning. Somebody is having to do that. And let's make sure we equip that person with the right tools, the right understanding to make that learner experience as powerful as we can for the student, for our employees. I'm going to end there for today, and thank you very much. I tried not to make this a sales presentation for a company, more rather than look at all the things and the trends that we're seeing as we work with our clients around the world. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Dr. David. There's so much that I would like to ask, but I would just like to turn to Dr. Kiko, last but not least, and then maybe we'll take a few questions.
Great. If I could share my screen, David, I don't know. There you go. Perfect. That's excellent. Well, salam alaikum, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. I'm Dr. Suarez, and I want to congratulate Dr. Aya Sedan and my colleagues for a great panel. We at Territorium are really focused on the value of comprehensive learner records, and I'm going to try to tie some of the things my colleagues have said to the idea of giving students or learners something that they can take from their learning experiences to other parts of the ecosystem, whether it's employers, other institutions, or even sometimes changing jobs from one to the next. We are a company with 9 million users globally, and we are obsessed with helping solve this problem. Employers continue to this day to say that students are not coming with the right skills. Education providers, on the other hand, continue to say that the education provided is valuable and it accomplishes the goal of having educated citizens. And meanwhile, learners are kind of in between saying, well, what about me? So back to my colleagues, at the end of the day, we all try to create some fluency. And that is the goal that we have, is the idea of fluency in the entire ecosystem. If you think about a comprehensive learner record, it's more than just the e-portfolio, and I'm going to tell you why in a second, but basically, you have to have the competencies and skills recognized and also the evidence. And many times we forget that having a competencies and skills profile not only allows people to prove that things are happening, but also to create that fluency across the entire ecosystem. I remember when we had our first daughter, we were living in Boston, Massachusetts at the time in the US. And the first visit that we had, it was not family. It was the Boston Red Sox. And they came with a little hat for the baby and some sort of a membership for life, which made me think, why couldn't governments or states issue a learning passport when you're born? And so then it can be stamped by the different players, different providers, different institutions, and even employers, as long as that one is interoperable and is secure. So what we wanted to provide is an infrastructure and also a fluency. We are absolutely convinced that the students receiving a traditional transcript don't know what they know. I have been a career coach for years, and I have had the best possible students, graduates from the best schools in the world, and give them 2 years after they leave, and they start changing their resume, forgetting about what their career center told them. And then this whole representation, personal representation to the world, starts to deviate from what works. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure that from the day you get in an education institution, you start to see what you're learning in a competencies and skills language that is aligned with the job market. And I always say there's this dilemma, if you want, in higher education specifically about, well, we are not a training provider. We are here to educate citizens. And that is true. But at the same time, education and employment shouldn't be opposites. They should be together. It's like yin and yang, right? And I think we owe the learner the opportunity to know what they are learning in a language that then will be used in the ecosystem when they leave. So one of the pieces that I believe we have to continue talking is this idea of using blockchain secure learning passports or wallets to give that learner the opportunity to continue to create not just a portfolio, but a competency profile that comes from different places, that is definitely interoperable, that can be used in the university setting or in the high school or school setting, secondary education, tertiary education, and then the employment or the job market. And that different systems can actually begin adding to that profile while everybody in the ecosystem starts gaining that fluency, which is not the learner now. It's everybody. I have witnessed conversations in an ecosystem level, meaning people from secondary education, tertiary university education, employers sitting at the table and having an interesting conversation where everybody talks past each other until there is some connection. A little bit what my colleagues have been saying about the human element. And I think it's not just the responsibility of technology, it's our responsibility to create that fluency. So when the different organizations or destinations, if you want, for a given learner, me, I want to make sure that they understand me, but I also want to make sure that I understand them. And so I have been very, very passionate as an international person. I was born in Spain. I worked in Europe. I worked in the Americas. And always said, wow, if learning experiences would be captured in a way that everybody understands, way beyond this idea of a LinkedIn profile with self-declared skills, but validated by a very active ecosystem of organizations that can produce not only the learning experiences of any kind, like my colleagues have said, could be in class, off campus, internships, whatever it is, and then assemble that in real time so the student can see how they are fitting their purpose as they declare their purpose into what opportunities are out there and which of these opportunities are a better match. The other thing that I remember clearly when I was talking to these students is that institutions try their best to provide the tools so the students know where they're heading after. There's this interesting joke in the United States that says that universities are the only business in the world that fires their clients every 4 years. And the reason for that is we tend to forget that life continues and that we are providing learners tools for life. Now, imagine the power of a secure record in the blockchain, even for alumni purposes. As simple as that. If as a learner I say, yeah, I want my institution to continue to connect with me and offer me learning opportunities after graduation, I may change my email or my phone, but I'm not going to lose my learning wallet. And so I think, and I'm going to conclude with this, inshallah, we will continue to provide learners with the tools they need, not only for the current experience, but for the entire journey. And to make sure that we create that fluency, that we don't necessarily obsess with one or another platform, but that we create an interconnected, interoperable ecosystem where learners can go and be comfortable sharing a complete profile of who they are in a secure way, in a portable way, and of course, in a digital way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kiko. Just really thinking about the potential in all of what you have put forward during your presentations. There's so much to explore, but I'm very conscious of time as well. So if we can maybe just take one or two questions. Okay. All right. Let's see. Mr. Samurai, if I might ask you to elaborate on specific challenges that you see in ensuring learner engagement. If organizations are trying to deploy platforms for academic or corporate learning purposes, and how might these challenges maybe inform the way that the trends are emerging in this area? It's on mute. If you could unmute. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Looking at, how we've been going through the journey of learning, e-learning, and so on and so forth, it's always been traditionally that, you learn for compliance, you learn for certification, but you learn for, yourself. So learning for yourself is more about the engagement piece. So people now are more comfortable even on the e-learning front, that they actually are trusting and believing that they can get certified from many sources, and probably they can put them in the digital wallet of Dr. Kiko. Then, when you have all of these in a place, how do you make sure that they're engaging? The engagement comes in at different levels. One is about motivational level, where you're being able to share your experiences in terms of your learning, in terms of what you're learning, and also your perspective of what you've learned onto a platform. So this is very important, that we are actually building some of these learning engagement platforms, as they call them, LXPs. And it could well mean any platform. So you might build a platform that's out of, as I said, edX, Moodle, and Blackboard. Even though they're three completely different platforms, you might still want to build a learning experience platform that is intelligent, understands what you're doing, and being able to share with your community, colleagues, peers, and students. So that's the expertise. And this has been challenging because it requires two levels of maturity. One, a mature technological implementation of what we've been doing. And second challenge is also about the learners themselves trying to understand that what engagement means. So what it actually brings to them.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, another question for Dr. David, please. the quote you used struck me. And in our thinking about the human element, I'm wondering if we enhance our abilities at change management and in designing these learning experiences, providing the appropriate tools and the training, is change always going to be painful?
It doesn't have to be. Quite often it is, and it depends on the type of people that we have on our teams. And the more we show our teams what good looks like, the more they will embrace change. And by that, I mean, we have to not only give them tools and data and the right kind of, or the latest and greatest technologies, we also have to show them how those put into practice looks for the student. What are we trying to show and convey with our messaging? And if we can show our individual team members, our colleagues, what good looks like, what are we trying to achieve by working together? What is the look of a good course, of a good class experience for a student online? Then they will embrace change more easily and more readily and be part of the disruptive work that we're doing to go bring e-learning to others. That's a great question, Dr. Haya.
Thank you. That was really fun, I think. I'd like to explore this further, but I would like to also pose a question to Oleg. I want to say that in our academic advising program at the university, we use the Blackboard spaces to enable the connections between students and advisors. And I want to ask more about how institutions can enhance the seamlessness between the multiple educational platforms and systems to support the students to get the most out of their experiences.
Yeah, Dr. Kaya, it's a great question. And I think we touched base on a number of these topics already during the presentation, but I think it becomes more important than ever to make sure that we really break the silos between different infrastructure, different systems, and try to understand, have a holistic view on what is actually going on in a space of a student. It might be both the way he operates, the way offline or online, and how we can really track these activities without keeping in mind their privacy and making sure that we don't disrupt their private life. Because there is always a fine line on how much data you can leverage in order to try to help the students or instructors, but when you actually break into their privacy. And that's where we will try to look very, very closely and making sure that we don't disrupt their space. But at the same time, we already started going into this direction to make sure that we track their interaction, their activity, their grades, their activity in the system and in the classroom. And for some students, for example, they might be idle, or we see that their grades going down time over time. We might need also to have a personal interaction. You can't rely on a system all the time, and that's where the role of the advisors come into place and becomes very important, really to make sure that we try to leverage these insights to proactively reach out and help students based on their interaction with the e-learning system or even on campus, and track their activities and performance.
Wonderful, wonderful. I really appreciate that. Okay, question for Dr. Kiko. The concept of fluency is a fascinating one. And from your experience and opinion, to integrate this with other record systems that are already existing across other systems in this digital ecosystem that we're now increasingly living in. Would this type of learner record, you think, do away with what we now know as the resume?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have had that conversation for years. I was speaking to a colleague of mine recently that said, when was the first time you wrote a resume? I'm 55, so it was probably in my 20s. It looks very much the same as the resume I would write today. And so if we cannot do that with technology, then we can't do anything with technology. Now, I also want to say, and by the way, David, I'm a doctor in leadership and change, so I admire your impetus, let's say, for change. And you've asked Dr. Haya the question for the different panelists about integration, change, pain, no pain, humans. And I think this idea of fluency, forget about technology for a second. If we could, as David said, convince the different stakeholders, whether they are departmental within an institution or outside the institution, that it's not healthy to complain about the system, because we all do. It's like, oh, not the system technology, but the system, and the lack of systemness and the lack of connection between education and workforce. And if we could actually say we are able to create fluency because we want to, then things will be a lot easier, because technology allows you to implement tons of things. It's more the willingness for us to come to that point. And to David's talk, if we realize that the players at a given time can change the outcomes of a human system, then we will start convincing ourselves that, yeah, we can do even better things. So am I confident that technology will replace the resume? Of course. Are we willing to have to create that fluency between government agencies, between universities, secondary education, employment, and even globally? That's really up to us. And I think we can.
Thank you so much. The great answer. I'm sure we could go on, but conscious of time, I think we will close the discussion here, if I may. I really want to thank you all for your time and your contributions to this panel today. Very much appreciative of all of your expertise. And I look forward to continuing these conversations further. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Very happy to introduce for you Nathan Thomas, okay, who will be leading this next session. Nathan is a postgraduate researcher and course tutor at the UCL Institute of Education. He is an applied linguistics tutor at the University of Oxford. So welcome, Nathan. Please go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really, really great to be here. I'm happy to have seen some of the talks already and to be sharing a project of my own. The project that I'm sharing today is a telecollaboration project where we paired up students from the UK with students in China, and we had them write letters virtually back and forth with each other. And then we gave them the opportunity to provide peer feedback on these letters on different aspects such as language, cultural topics, any aspects the students from either side found interesting. And we wanted to do this as a way to enhance student engagement with both language learning and intercultural learning during the time of COVID, essentially. So when they didn't have the opportunity to go abroad or to experience these other cultures in person. So you may be wondering, what exactly is telecollaboration? You probably have some idea based on what I've explained already. So telecollaboration essentially is a form of virtual exchange where two cohorts work together in online formats to solve complex tasks. So how we interpret complex tasks will, of course, be different depending on what we're looking at. But in this particular activity, it's about writing and providing feedback on writing in an interactive way. So to take another often cited definition, we can look at O'Dowd's conceptualization of telecollaboration as the application of online communication tools to bring together classes of language learners in geographically distant locations with the aim to develop their language skills as well as intercultural competence through various collaborative tasks and project work. So to distill these into how we are viewing telecollaboration for our project that I'm sharing today, we see it, the core components of it as some sort of virtual exchange that involves students from the UK as well as students from China, with the aims to improve language skills, especially for the students in the Chinese context, since English was the language of communication, the medium of communication, as well as intercultural competence between learners in both contexts through the collaborative tasks of writing and providing feedback on writing. So I don't have a lot of time to present a full literature review today, of course, but just to provide an example of how popular this topic has been becoming since, I guess since about the past 10 to 12 years or so. If we take one popular journal in my field, which is computer-assisted language learning, we can look at the amount of studies that have been published with telecollaboration in the title and in the abstract. And we can see that there's quite a lot of work with pre-service teachers in different contexts where they exchange ideas and exchange experiences about their pre-service or teacher training. We can also see lots of studies with university students in different contexts where they're mainly language learners and they're using this telecollaboration as a form of language exchange as well as cultural exchange. And then we see fewer studies at the secondary and primary levels. I couldn't identify any at the primary level in this particular journal. And I think that this is an area that we would like to see more work on, especially. You can imagine that it would be trickier with primary students and younger secondary students because of ethical considerations. But I'm hoping that with some of the ideas that I shared today, this might be something that others can look at in the future. So for our project, we're focusing at this university level. Telecollaboration has been around for quite some time. And one thing that we like about it is that it doesn't require any incredibly advanced e-learning platforms. We just need basic Web 2.0, and we can engage in activities as long as there's some way for the learners to communicate with each other. Ideally, this would take place synchronously, but of course, for example, in our study, this wasn't possible due to the time difference. But any way where the students can exchange ideas and communicate, be it synchronously or asynchronously. Telecollaboration has always had some form of intercultural exchange with the idea that language cannot be separated from culture. When we learn one, we simultaneously learn the other so we can figure out how to use the language. appropriately in certain socio-cultural contexts. And this is just something that has progressed from the very early studies we can see from that have been written up in various monographs and edited volumes, all the way to very, very recent work where intercultural communicative competence has been fronted and is seen as one of the main purposes of doing this kind of telecollaboration. One distinction that I would like to make clear, just because there is sometimes confusion about differences between intercultural communication and intercultural communicative competence. For this project, we draw on Byram's popular distinction as well as his theoretical framework of ICC. If we look at the way he defines intercultural competence, he would describe it as the ability to interact, for someone to interact with others in their own language. And these other people will be from other countries and other cultures. However, this is still using their own same first language. So in our study, the British participants who were located in the UK, we could consider what they're doing as a form of intercultural competence because English is their first language. Intercultural communicative competence refers to the ability to interact with people from another country and culture in a foreign language. So in this sense, the Chinese students in our study who were using English as a form of communication in this project would be doing what Byram would consider intercultural communicative competence. So I want to make it clear that we're aware of these distinctions. However, in the project as a whole, we're describing both groups through this theoretical framework of intercultural communicative competence, which I'll refer to as ICC for the rest of the presentation. And we feel that this is appropriate because ICC affords this relationship building and enables someone to take into consideration their own and others' viewpoints and needs while communicating. So even though our British participants are using their first language, they're still having to accommodate their language and make sure that they're communicating in a way that their Chinese peers who are language learners will be able to understand them. So we see this interaction between language knowledge and cultural knowledge as being something that happens on both sides of this project and not just one where the Chinese learners have to try to catch up since they're using a foreign language. Just very briefly, again, due to time, I'm not able to delve into all of the aspects of the theoretical framework, but we can see here, this is Byram's model of intercultural communicative competence, which includes these main skills of intercultural competence, which I'll be talking about today, which is skills related to interpreting and discovery, as well as cultural knowledge, attitudes about culture, and critical cultural awareness. So in the questionnaire that I'll be reporting on, you'll see different aspects of this in the subscales for skills, attitudes, awareness, and knowledge. This is paired up with linguistic aspects when we talk about the way that language is used in these different communicative exchanges. So linguistic competence being, of course, the ability to use a language effectively. Sociolinguistic competence being one's ability to use the language appropriately in certain social situations. For example, I'm speaking now probably slightly differently because of the social context than I would be if I were just talking to my friends informally, for example. And then discourse competence, which is being able to string together larger chunks of text or forms of communication in cohesive and coherent ways. So the impetus for this project sort of stemmed from these new normals, or the new normal that we've been experiencing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We wanted to design a project that would enable us to create this virtual environment where university students from different language and cultural backgrounds could engage in this cross-cultural communication remotely. So to improve their critical thinking and ICC skills, knowledge, awareness, without having to go abroad, because that just simply wasn't possible during this time. And even though this was something that we developed as a result of the pandemic situation, of course, it's been going on and taking place long before our project, as I mentioned earlier, and it will continue to move forward. So I'm hoping that some of the information that I shared today will be helpful for others who may be considering doing similar projects. Some of the initial challenges that we experienced, of course, was the time difference between the UK and China, and as well as students with different class schedules. So trying to coordinate between the time difference and the different scheduling of the students was an issue. So we realized very early on that synchronous communication just wasn't going to be possible in our particular project. So we decided on this asynchronous communication via personal writing, so letters sent back and forth about topics related to university life and the students' experiences, as well as students having the opportunity to comment on their peers' essays, which is their peers' letters, which is something I'll mention later on as well. Of course, popular platforms that could be accessible in both the UK and China was a bit tricky, trying to find appropriate platforms that would work in both contexts due to different restrictions. So we ended up, and also, of course, limited funding. So we did have some funding for this project. However, we didn't have enough to create a bespoke or custom platform for this. So we ended up using Canvas, which, if anyone is familiar with Moodle or Blackboard, Canvas has a lot of those same kind of e-learning features as that kind of platform, as a place where the students could all meet together, where they could share their writing, where they had individual forums where they could talk to their peers, and then also group forums where they could communicate with the group. And of course, students used this to various degrees. We didn't require them to post a certain amount or do anything like that. As long as they completed the writing task, we were quite happy with it. And then finally, the difficulty in finding comparable intact classes, which would have made this project a lot easier, of course. So we ended up using Chinese students from 2 undergraduate classes from a university in Shanghai, and we used UK volunteers. So all of the UK students were from the same university here in London. They were volunteers, so they didn't come from the same cohort, but they were all roughly around the same age and were comparable in that sense. So the project overview looks like this. In the first week, we gave them, all of the participants, a pre-treatment questionnaire to look at various aspects related to ICC, experience with peer feedback, as well as the background knowledge about each participant. We then gave them a short text to read that would give them some contextual background as to what we wanted them to think about and reflect on in their first letter, which was related to the topic of why I attend college. So we chose this topic so that the students would have something personal to write about, and that would hopefully draw on some cultural aspects that they could share with their peer in the other context. So in week 2, they were given the opportunity to provide feedback on the peer's letter that they were paired up with. So this gave them an opportunity to comment on things such as language, any aspects they found interesting, confusing, parts of the letter that they wanted to learn more about. And then in week 3, they were able to revise and resubmit their letters so that their peer could see the changes that they'd made. And, and of course, for that we could see the changes that they had made and the kind of feedback that they gave. Week 4 was essentially a catch-up. So we had this as kind of a break and a chance for students who had missed some deadlines to catch up and complete all of the tasks. We also didn't want this project to be incredibly a large burden for the students. It was kind of an additional thing to their normal coursework. So we were very cognizant of that. So the same cycle repeated in weeks 5, 6, and 7, but with a different topic. This related to life after graduation. So as you can imagine, when you take the first essay, the first letter, why I attend college, and you combine that with the second one, which is life after graduation, you have this nice narrative of the students' experiences that taps into a lot of elements related not only to language, but also different cultural backgrounds and about life decisions and experiences that the students had. In week 8, we gave them a post-treatment questionnaire, again, about ICC and peer feedback, and of course, just general perceptions of what participation was like. 16 of the students participated in post-treatment interviews, and then plan to do an analysis of writing and feedback practices. So just to very briefly go over some initial findings, those will relate to the first and third research question here, which I only have time to just kind of scratch the surface of today. But we're essentially looking at what the British and Chinese university students' perceptions of their own ICC and peer feedback was at the start of the project, and then again at the end. And of course, with that difference, we wanted to know if this kind of treatment, if participating in an activity like this changed their perceptions at all. So if they were engaging in these kind of intercultural exchanges in a way that could produce some kind of statistically significant difference. in their perceptions. So as I mentioned before, the questionnaire had aspects related to attitude, knowledge, skills, awareness, giving and receiving peer feedback, and then various open-ended items. Of course, today I'm just going to pick and choose a couple interesting aspects to share. So the initial findings from the pre-treatment questionnaire, we can see that there was really no real difference between the groups. I mean, to be honest, these were quite superficial answers. The students were, expected the project to be fun, exciting, interesting, and again, not too time-consuming. So essentially, they wanted to be involved in something that that was enjoyable, that was meaningful, but wouldn't necessarily seem like a burden to them. So as a researcher, there's not much interesting here in terms of what they expected it to be like, or what they hoped it to be like. But in terms of what they hoped to gain by participating in this project and having a peer from a different background to interact with, it was quite interesting. Of course, the British students who were using English, which was their first language, were mostly interested in cultural learning experiences, learning from university students around the world, having this awareness of other cultures, and just more experience sharing. Whereas the Chinese students had similar responses, but were also interested in English language improvement. There were lots of comments about the opportunity to have a native speaker, this is their term, a native speaker to look at their writing, to suggest improvements. So we can see that there's this kind of novelty aspect of pairing up students in this way, where the Chinese students felt like they had this special experience to be able to communicate to someone who was a native speaker of English and could provide feedback on their writing. Again, just very briefly looking at the descriptive statistics here from the pre-treatment questionnaire, we can see that the UK participants rated themselves slightly higher than the Chinese participants in terms of their ICC background in the beginning. We can see this overall, and especially significant differences in their attitudes and knowledge about different cultures, whereas skills and awareness were slightly lower, not necessarily anything really significant there. After the treatment, so the post-treatment questionnaire, we can see that, again, the UK students sort of rated themselves slightly higher than the Chinese students in terms of their ICC overall and in every subskill. We can also see that the between-group difference was significant for all of the subskills. So in this sense, the Chinese students didn't necessarily surpass the British students in terms of their self-perceptions of ICC. And then we can see differences over time with tests like ANOVA, which showed that there was no real within-group difference across time. And we believe that this has to do with the length and less intense treatment that we went with. We think that a longer sort of treatment, as well as something more intensive with a bit more time to exchange with their peers, would have produced something more significant in terms of within group change over the course of the treatment. Finally, just to share some last remarks, some of the qualitative sort of open-ended responses that we got in the post-treatment questionnaire. The British students found that it was nice to have this personal experience, to have this opportunity to communicate with students from a different culture. It also forced them to reflect on their own educational choices and kind of put into writing why they attend college and what their plans are afterwards. So lots of students found this very helpful as a reflective exercise. And then, of course, we're very happy to see comments like this one where it says, this participant felt like they had made a new friend. So some of the students even exchanged contact information and planned to keep in touch with their peer, which is quite nice. For the Chinese students, of course, a lot of them found that it was very helpful to get feedback on the writing from a native speaker of English. They also found that for a lot of them, this was the first time they had ever communicated with a native speaker in any way. So it was a brand new learning experience for them, and gave them different ways of thinking about language and culture. And this participant mentioned this deep communication with a British student. Again, this kind of novelty experience. And then the last question that I'll be reporting on is about sort of what they gained, essentially. So even though the results were not statistically significant in terms of their perceived gain in the questionnaire, qualitatively, we see lots of interesting things here. So from the British students, this consciousness of other cultures, to view their own writing from a different perspective. So they had to force themselves to think critically about their own writing and how they were communicating. and how they're using language in different ways, as well as having to adapt their writing style to be comprehensible to someone of a slightly lower language proficiency level, but still be able to have enjoyable communication. For the Chinese students, they thought that it was great to have some sort of peer to share their ideas with. Again, that novelty of a peer in another context makes this quite special. We like that. So a lot of the students felt that the comments they received were gentle suggestions, genuine suggestions, things that enabled them to feel respected as adults, and not just having this power difference between a native speaker and a language learner, but actually feeling like they had this genuine communication. And again, I think to me, that's really special, this last comment, to say that they realized that the British students were actually not that different than them when they got to the bottom of it. When they moved beyond cultural stereotypes, they realized that, a lot of them were just like us, just like our friends around us. Whereas before, the only interaction they had was, with watching movies or seeing British TV shows, for example. So it gave them the opportunity to realize that even though culturally they're from different backgrounds, that actually they had a lot in common. So in terms of next steps, this is my last slide. In terms of next steps, we plan to do an in-depth analysis of the students' written narratives to delve into a bit more about the experiences they shared, as well as their feedback practices, and of course, to analyze the post-treatment interviews. Some unexpected trajectories that I would like to problematize in looking at this data would be, what does it mean to be British, or what does it mean to be Chinese in a study like this, where stereotypes are inevitably going to come up. And of course, how is culture conceptualized by these learners in different contexts? We feel that just looking at the initial data, we can see that these would be interesting questions to follow up on with a more critical lens. So some recommendations for future practice for anyone trying to do something similar. We think that clear communication from the very beginning is incredibly important, both for the participants and for the stakeholders involved. We ran into some intercultural communicative issues with our Chinese team and trying to figure out how to manage the logistics of the project. And of course, some of the students felt that even though we tried to make this stress-free, they felt like some of them felt that it was a bit more work than they had initially expected in terms of providing feedback and revising. So we could have been clearer about those expectations. And of course, a longer, more intense treatment would have produced probably more significant gains in terms of the quantitative data. If we could have paired intact cohorts together, this would have been very helpful with scheduling. And of course, maybe could have created more opportunities for synchronous communication between the learners. So this could be something that could work, for example, in pairing cohorts in the UK with cohorts in Saudi Arabia, for example, because there's only the 3-hour time difference. So the work and school day is very similar. So we think that this could be something that could be explored in the future. So thank you for that. If you're interested in seeing updates on this project or any of the other work that I do, these will be updated on my ResearchGate page. So thank you very much for listening.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to panel 6, which is leading change to adapt to a new economy. Right. We have with us 4 esteemed panelists. Dr. Becky, who is the recovery officer from the state of Colorado for the Department of Labor and Higher Education. She is going to talk to us about leading change and innovation in higher education and the key enablers and success factors to make this happen. Right. And next, we have Dr. Bandar Al-Khayal, right, who's the general manager of program accreditation with ETech NCAA from Saudi. And he will actually take us through how the e-learning landscape is evolving and how the regulators and accreditors are keeping track and also adapting to ensure that this, to enable this ecosystem. Number 3, we have Mr. Brook, who is the CEO of eLearn Africa. And he's going to share with us his practical on-the-ground experience of how technology and e-learning platforms are evolving and enabling this change cross boundaries. And we will close with Dr. Christina, who's the leader of Innovation Research Center from PwC, who will share some thoughts on how we can make the digital transformation responsible for education and how we can all work together to maximize impact of digital education. Right, without further ado, I'll open it up to Dr. Becky, and we will have a last 10 minutes for question and answers, which you can address to any of the panelists.
Thank you very much. So before I talk about leading change in higher education, I thought I should set the stage with a little background information in hopes that that information will provide context to what I will then be sharing. Prior to my work in higher education, I came from business and private equity, where my area of expertise was operational turnarounds of companies. In that work, I found it interesting, if not disappointing, that the companies I was turning around were led and managed by those with college degrees. So I was determined that in my next phase of work, I would stop complaining about the real world outcomes I was seeing from higher education or those that had received degrees, and instead really work to provide solutions for real world workplace success through that education. Specifically, I had hoped that through integrated work-based courses and programs, that there might be fewer turnarounds that would have to be done in the future. However, I knew that in order to enter the industry that I needed to meet the barrier of entry, so I earned my doctorate and then set out to contribute. And in that search to help, I was picked up by Colorado State University Global, which turned out to be the first fully online, fully accredited public institution in the US. Interestingly, CSU Global did not receive state funding. That was the way it was statutorily created. It was funded by the CSU system with a $12 million loan, which needed to be, and in fact was paid back with 6% interest. Because of that unique structure, I found myself leading a nonprofit state institution that could not secure loans, could not sell stock, as you could in a private organization, and for which I was very familiar. So therefore, I was just solely dependent on student engagement and retention for success. And so it took all that I had from my business background and applied everything I'd learned from leading teams over the decades and all the research and information I had acquired through my PhD program to ensure that CSU Global survived and that it had ongoing success and sustainability. My path in that CSU Global journey was to incorporate transformational goals to get all the stakeholders at the highest level of thinking away from their own individual reasons for being involved in the institution and up to the greater good of serving non-traditional students in a way that we could each appreciate, value, and be proud of. I also worked really hard to ensure accountability and fairness in every action taken at the organization through data capture and team analysis of that data involved in all levels of employees, importantly, and including those at the front line in their work with students. Leading and driving from a metric-based approach to help me keep the working environment as objective as possible to try to prevent finger pointing and blame. And along those same lines, I also worked to embed a culture of no risk innovation and problem solving and continual improvement. The staff and faculty were encouraged and never penalized for bringing new ideas to their working groups, while groups that did move forward on new concepts were encouraged to keep iterating and improving on their concepts until the outcome data met their original goals and expectations. So my role in that journey of staff and faculty and other stakeholder collaboration really began by my leading the primary activities for culture creation and evolution. I did that by spearheading convenings and starting the discussions, but then letting the teams do the actual work, the thinking, the contributing, and then deciding on the institution's foundational frameworks for change, such as values, mission, vision of the organization. I drove bottoms up, top down, across organization collaborative strategic planning and budgeting process, so there was full transparency in that, and then facilitated new and novel process development, deployment, and improvement through data capture. Again, trying to keep objectivity at the foremost in our minds. I also believed that the team members at every level were experts in their respective areas and encouraged them to speak up and to be heard. So in that role, I was the initiator of the activities, the cheerleader of the teams, the overseer to ensure that everyone was being heard and equally engaged in the processes and decision-making, while also being the constant communicator of the reasons behind the agreed upon activities and why everyone needed to be involved. It really did take all of us. So with over 20,000 graduates, top US News and World rankings, and over 40,000 students later, after about a decade of work in getting CSU Global to where it was when I left in 2020, I am proud to say that the processes and methodologies worked. I should also share that the evolutionary and change work may have been led by me, but it was my teams of VPs, directors, and managers that ensured the operational process change were implemented through their work and their teams in a similarly collaborative bottoms-up approach. I knew that they had the best and most accurate understanding of each individual on their team, so they were the experts to secure the individual engagement and agreement necessary to actually enact change. So to have the right leaders working with me was absolutely key in the successful execution of all that we accomplished, and it truly was a team effort. I also believe that it was important to our success that we adopted a method of innovation and new idea implementation that centered around a phrase that I used regularly, which was toss a pebble, throw a stone, and then launch a boulder. That approach or philosophy allowed us to test new ideas and concepts more quickly and with minimal numbers of students, secure feedback and outcome data, have further discussions on what we were seeing in the classrooms, and then convene staff and faculty and teams to agree on how to improve the data and outcomes through an iterative approach. And only once the data and outcomes reached or exceeded the previously identified goals did we scale those initiatives. So while I wish there was an easier and faster solution to driving change, as you've just heard, it took work and intentionality on everyone's part, but it's absolutely achievable as CSU Global outcomes over the years have demonstrated. So I hope that information has been helpful as you consider your institutions and departments and the level of change that will increasingly be needed to ensure that higher education remains relevant to industries and their needs for continual upskilling and reskilling. My work at the state of Colorado really is to bridge what industry needs are with higher education and post-secondary opportunities. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to share my experience, and I'll turn the floor back to you, Raghav.
Thank you, Dr. Becky. It's inspiring. Maybe I can hand over to Dr. Bandar to take us through the next.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Bandar Al-Kayal. I'm the General Manager of Program Accreditation at the National Center of Academic Accreditation and Evaluation under the umbrella of Education and Training Evaluation Commission in Saudi Arabia. Today, my talk will be about transforming accreditation through Quality 4.0 for the new economy directions. First and most, we'll talk about ETIC, which is the commission that dealing with education and training here in Saudi Arabia, and what their main role, that's they're in charge of quality assurance and control for both education and training, the K-12 higher education and training, as well as doing assessment. So we have also a National Center of Assessment that doing assessment for all the three sectors, the K-12, higher education, and training. All of that will go with Saudi Vision 2030. If we do an overview about the vision and what's the strategy objective about the vision that we're talking about, the nation, economy, and society. That's what they call, that's level 1. When we go to level 2, you will find 27 objective, which is the branches of that objective, will end up to a 96 level 3 strategic plan. All of that will have some programs, what we call them programs, that will serve those objectives to lead to the vision. So today we're talking, in the education, we're focusing on human capital development program. So the human capital development program is very important program, that the main goal of it, that will make the global competitive citizen, and the role, and what is the role of the high quality education and training in vision, and in the Saudi Vision, and also in this program. It's they're very important, and that's why there is 16 level of this objective related only for education and training. So what the program will promote, that will provide a lifelong learning opportunities, preparing for the future, for labor market, flexible education for all ages. And the role of ethic, it goes around this quality of the education and training to serve the human capital development program. So in other words, this program is a newly refreshed Vision 2030 program. It's the chair of it's the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's the chair of this program, and that's how it's very important. And it was also created to develop citizen capability, prepare them for the future, to be also to compete globally. It's also, this program helps in values, basic future needs, enhancing the knowledge, what other opportunities and skills that the citizens and the graduate of education and from education in Saudi Arabia, that they will be able to gain and compete globally. Objective, build a lifelong learning journey, expand also vocational training to provide to labor market needs. And now the educational, the vocational, what we're speaking now, we're 23% of our graduates in high school, they go to vocational programs. However, in the 2025, the goal is 30%. By 2030 will be 40%. So that will also help to improve the readiness of youth to enter the labor market. No need for a bachelor degree to enter labor market, because you need to have skills in every discipline. That will lead us to, is the future micro. Are we looking for micro credential? The micro credential now, they're gaining increase around the globe. Everybody talking about them. Everybody talking about the e-learning, traditional learning and e-learning. Is there different? Is there something they call it live online, which is you interact with your instructor, or only online? So the micro-credential landscape, I would say, it will be the new model of digital education, professional development. You can learn that lifelong employability. That will enhance the quality of people, enhance the quality of their skills, their knowledge, all over the years. They don't have to wait for a traditional 4-year degree or 2-year degree for a master and so on. So this will lead us to Quality 4.0. Now, everything talking about 4.0, it was started with, I would say, the Industry 4.0. So when the Industry 4.0 came and everybody talking about it, now there is Quality 4.0 that will talk to that Industry 4.0. That's why we see also Business 4.0. Recently, also there is a conference about Legal 4.0 to help accommodate the 4.0 revolution. So when we do transformation and transforming academic accreditation through Quality 4.0, that means we want to rely on data, on analyzing the data to have accreditation. So why we need accreditation? What's the difference between accredited program and non-accredited program? Now with all the global needs, you're looking for accreditation because you want to make the program, the institute is different than others. With our meetings with our colleagues in MIT and Harvard, when we asked them why do you need accreditation, they said it's not about the institute itself, it's about the parents, the stakeholders. That's what they're looking for. They want to trust. So what are we looking for? We're looking for data. In another word, that we're looking for the employment of the students. Are you aligned with the market? That's with the transforming that we're working on now in Saudi Arabia, that we want to make sure that's our program that align with the market needs. That's what's the goal of the program, a human development program. Also, the employment rate is good for that program to keep it on, to keep it live. So this, when we practice the quality 4.0, when we do the management system, analyzing the data, have data from all disciplines, reading, that will help us also enhance the quality 4.0 and decisions and the accreditation. So some of the tools that we might use related to the academic accreditation, the AI is very important. The big data, that's what I was talking about. Enabling technology, machine learning, data science, all of these very important tools in academic accreditation. As well as we don't want to forget about sustainable development. That's the education and economy, very, very important on the sustainable development goals. Back to what are we doing? As I mentioned earlier, we have 4 centers, 1 national center for assessment, higher education and training, and K-12. I'm talking about NCAA, the National Center for Academic Accreditation and Evaluation, where we dealing with higher education. Established to 2004, is the only body in charge of accreditation and quality assurance for a private and public higher education institution program in Saudi Arabia. It's also it's licensed the International Accreditation Agency working in Saudi Arabia to make sure that they're licensed in their country, they're able to do abroad accreditation. It's a dependent from Ministry of Education, as well as ethics is dependent from Ministry of Education. They report directly to the Prime Minister, which gives them I would say, overseeing the quality and evaluate and do assessment for the education sector in Saudi. So this, in short, the transformation, we're talking about governance. You need to do governance in your transformation. Process and procedures, training the reviewers, looking at your standards, also partnering, engagement, and international profile. All of those very important to have when we do transformation. So governance, the structure, we established 5 accreditation council for engineering, healthcare, Arabic Islamic studies, and so on, to the rationale of that, to have more transparency about this, to have the more, they will have the decisions to decide about accredited program after all the accreditation steps and review that been doing and visit and so on. You will have people from professional community as well as academia. So to bridge the gap between them, they will have the final say. This is the practice internationally. And process and procedures integrated with the quality 4.0, with starting with program accreditation, reducing the standards, annual follow-up, 1-year contract, so we can do that in a timely fashion. Integrated with independent entities, like they need to do something, we call it qiyas with the national assessment. You have to do what they call it exit exam or licensing exams. Integrated with a new level of institutional accreditation. Integrated with the ranking. Now we're working on something national ranking. Also with evaluation studies, for example, private institution evaluation study, discipline specific. What's the future of engineering in Saudi? What's the future of healthcare in Saudi, and so on. Review, development, transformation, very important to license your review, to have a solid trained review. We have a lot of programs on this, launched since 2020, and at this name, that's a quality training and a quality review training, and also licensing them. Standard and key learning, where also from a quality point of view, what we did is we used to have a general learning outcome, general standard. Now we're moving for more disciplined. We'll have more impact on outcome based. It used to be a mission-driven accreditation, which is data standard accreditation. Now we're working for outcome-driven. So what's the outcome of this? What's the outcome of students? How this will be effective and align with the market? How this will increase their employability? Multi-layer of partnering engagement, strategic governance with the board of directors, linking with the labor market, development and continuous, and also international repetition. Finally, with the international profile, we have in the accreditation abroad. Now we're getting also licensed to have accreditation abroad outside Saudi, recognition by INCAHI, which is the international network for quality assurance for higher education, WIFME recognition, which is the World Federation for Medical Education. They visited us to accredit the accreditor, accredit us. So all the graduates of MD, they can practice fellowship in North America. Washington Accord and Seoul Accord, they're also accredit the accreditor, us to be part of the accords for engineering and computer and IT related. Also, we are membership of CHIA, which is the Council of Higher Education Accreditation in the US, INCAHI, and the Islamic Network, Arab Network, Gulf Network. Quality assurance of e-learning and distance in education. We do licensing by the e-learning center. That's what they do. The National Center, the National E-Learning Center, under the umbrella of Ministry of Education. They ensure all the technical infrastructure readiness before starting. When they come to us by ETIC, we ensure having the proper learning for planning for learning outcome. When we look at the programmatic accreditation, we ensure the quality of the output, emphasizing learning outcome, ensure the academic quality after graduation. The takeaway message is that shifting from measuring input to measuring outcome with this, that's what the new economy looking for, especially students' learning outcome with increased focus on the labor market need, increased attention to the need, include various forms of distance learning and quality assurance. Also, with this time, the knowledge and skills need to be updated quickly with the national need and international need. Quality 4.0 will improve employment baseline skills and better the skills scale up. Also, a culture shift will be required for Quality 4.0. A lot of initiatives will be involved in to be successful. Quality 4.0 will expand internally and externally with the Internet of Things. Data-driven, and data will help you gain a lot of information. This revolution also will help the future quality to achieve perfection. And thank you. Sorry for being more than 10 minutes.
No problem, Dr. Bandar. Thanks again for a very informative presentation, especially the concepts around micro-learning, Quality 4.0, and how Quality 4.0 will actually evolve, and goes back to Dr. Becky's point as well around toss a pebble, throw a stone, and then you can launch a boulder, right? No risk innovation, and both need to go hand in hand to make this whole ecosystem successful. So I think it's a nice segue into the next presentation from Mr. Brook as well. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for your time. Let me just share my screen here. And I am not able to. Very strange. Yep. There we go. So good afternoon, and for most of us, I guess good morning. My name is Brook Negussi. I'm Chief Executive Officer of eLearn Africa. In 2016, we sought to change the landscape of online learning throughout the continent of Africa, which we realized quickly that it was a very ambitious endeavor. We therefore decided that we would partner with the Association of African Universities to understand the needs of the varsity universities throughout the continent. So through our journey, we found that a lot of the traditional educators were unwilling to move to online learning, and primarily because it was not a resistance of technology, but it was more of a fear of what we found to be institutional pride. And so we quickly learned to figure out a way to find what we said when we set out to the early adapters in the e-learning space. And this was an engagement that was snail mail, fax throughout the continent, because the internet is not throughout the continent. And we found that in engaging educators and finding out what their needs were, we were able to design a product and a program that would serve their best needs. We clearly understood that setting milestones and objectives was key for success of the overall program, and that having small targets and achieving them was a way to ensure that e-learning in Africa would be a moving forward point. Unfortunately, COVID came, and we had a very small turnaround of time to implement universities for online learning. What took us 2.5 years of convincing universities took us to 75 universities, literally within that COVID timeframe. And through this, what we came to understand is that the change has actually brought an interesting focus in terms of how professors and students interact. There is now, I believe, a decentering of the professor's time primarily and a student-centric learning environment. Through this entire process, we've learned that the key part is basically to ensure that the institutional pride is not eroded. So, and that's where we leave it. I know I have 10 minutes, but I figured it's been a long day for everybody, and I didn't want to bore anybody. So, Raghav, I hope you don't mind. I cut it short.
No, thanks, Brooke. I think there'll be questions which we can address in the Q&A as well. It's very interesting. Maybe over to you, Christina, to take us through.
Yes, hello everybody, and it looks like somebody has to first close the sharing screen.
That would be me. All right. You have the techie that has a problem with Zoom out of all things. So there we go. Okay.
No, you're still
sharing, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. All right, so thank you very much for this opportunity, and hello everybody. My name is Christina Darfujeda, and I would like to address the topic of a responsible digital transformation of education. So let's open up the word responsible, but before we do so, it is important to mention that any transformation of education in the new age represents a big challenge because we live in a so-called VUCA world. Maybe you are familiar with this term that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we live in the world which is changing with a tremendous speed in a highly uncertain environment, highly complex with lots of factors playing a role, and ambiguous because we always have to make decisions based on incomplete and often even inaccurate information. So how do you go about it? And fortunately, there is a way to be successful also in this world when transforming education. And for that, we need to figure out how to translate or transform previous abbreviations into vision, understanding, commitment, and agility instead, which means that we need to have a clear vision, clear idea where we want to go with our transformation. We need to have a good understanding of how we should go about it and base it on the best available data. It's not enough just to have a clear idea and a vision. We also need to demonstrate a clear commitment and invest effort in transforming this vision into reality. And finally, since the world is changing with the rapid speed, we need to stay agile. And this all sounds brilliant in theory, but how do you do this in practice? And that is the question that we try to answer in our extensive study for the European Commission, which is called Curriculum Guidelines 4.0. This is, again, this reference to 4.0 that Dr. Bandar also mentioned in his presentation, and is exactly the same reference to the Industry 4.0 developments and the implications of that for the education. And our task was to develop curriculum guidelines or general guidelines to education and training providers to help them go through a transformation of educational systems, and including also the digital component of it. And if you're interested, the final report and the brochure are all available on the Commission's website. So in this presentation today, I would like to address the three key messages that came out of that study, and that actually opens up the term responsible digital transformation of education. And the first one is that transformation of educational systems requires a systemic approach. The second one, that it needs to be centered around learners and not technology. And the third one is that it's crucial to understand and manage risks associated with excessive or inappropriate technology use. And let's go into each of these messages in more detail. So, systemic approach implies understanding the whole picture when it comes about transforming the educational offer. So we do not only need to think about, for example, content or delivery mechanisms, but we need to go through all the key elements starting from strategy. And here you can see our curriculum guidelines framework from this study. And it includes 8 elements. You can see them all here. Please do not try to read the whole text. I'll just guide you very briefly through it. But what I really wanted to highlight here is that the first thing to start with is the strategy. Which relates to the overall vision, again, where we want to be, what do we want to achieve with our educational transformation, what kind of learning performances, what kind of outcomes do we want to have, what kind of skills, what kind of competences. So that should be the key question posed at this initial stage, not the technology or any other solution, because we need to go through a series of different questions before we even arrive at specific solutions, how it should be organized. And delivery mechanisms, where technology falls, it goes here under step 5, as you can see. So technology, digital solutions could be the best option to go for, but it does not always have to be the best or the first option to go for. And before we arrive there, we need to consider many other things, starting from strategy. So systemic approach was the first one. The second one is that responsible digital transformation is centered around learners and not technology, and it puts desired human competences at the heart of education. And technology can be a prominent element in this transformation, but it should rather be viewed as an enabler for adding value, for increasing effectiveness of education, and not as the main driver of change, because everybody's doing that, because it's 21st century, because everything goes digital. So again, our suggestion based on this extensive research would be not to see this as the initial driver or starting point for the transformation. Then this responsible digital transformation views learners as change agents and prominently engages them in curriculum development and implementation from the very beginning. And of course, it needs to prepare students for a lifelong learning throughout their career and beyond, because as we all know, the world around us evolves very quickly, and whatever we are learning now or today cannot be relevant or can be quickly become outdated tomorrow. So it's important to incorporate these lifelong learning principles into this new educational offer. And then we come to the final point, and that's managing risks associated with excessive and inappropriate technology use. That is a new hot topic that is emerging around the world, and it's becoming increasingly popular in Europe. To look not only at benefits that technology provides in education, but to be realistic and have a good picture also of risks and challenges associated with technology use. And that comes from the fact that a massive and continuously growing evidence base suggests that digital technology also can have harmful effects on learners if applied inappropriately. And here I tried to cluster some of examples of impacts of this harmful effects, or potentially harmful. Does not always have to be so, but we just have to be cautious about it. The first one is impact on physical health. And that is related to research connected to the radiation, for example, from wireless devices and its impact on human health. Issues related to ergonomics, that we need to pay more attention to that. Otherwise, there is increased risk of painful syndromes in the future. Vision problems associated with technology use, lack of physical activity, and so on. So more attention needs to be paid to those points. Then impact on mental health. So there is a growing indication that inappropriate use of technology can also lead to mental health disorders. So you can read it here. It's technology addiction, social isolation, depression, anxiety, and so on. It can also have a negative impact on learning performance and skills if applied inappropriately. And we also have seen studies, prominent studies do show that this perception that digital technology increases learning performance very often cannot be supported by empirical research. And it is important to find out why is it like this, what's not working there, and how can we make sure that digital education actually does lead to a better learning performance. So more attention needs to be paid to that too. And finally, impact on motivation to learn. So the same story here, that existing research very often shows that motivation of learners decreases with the introduction of digital components. It is not always like this, of course, and this should all be treated with great caution, but it just suggests that we need to open up this other side of the story and start looking also from the perspective of mitigation of risks and challenges. And that will allow us to make the most out of digital education and to follow the path of responsible digital transformation. So that was it from my side. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Christina. Thank you for the presentation, and especially highlighting that as we start adapting to digital e-learning, right, there are things that we need to keep in mind to make sure that we are responsible and we use technology to help us, and it doesn't create more systemic issues on the side, which we will have to deal with later. But thanks again to all panelists. There are some couple of questions that have come up, which I would, and then we can open up the floor. I think the first one is to Dr. Becky, especially around the innovation and the topic around bottom-up innovation, right? So the question is, could you please provide some examples of how some of these bottom-up innovation, the process, and also some examples of how this was incubated and brought forward, right?
Sure. So I will use the example of competency-based learning in education so that we could create a new model as a separate option for our online courses so that students could have a self-paced course and then go in and take a final exam or submit a portfolio project. And so that was the goal. And then we asked for volunteers of faculty, staff, and some students who wanted to convene and come together to create what that model might look like. And as they started down that road and created the course was good and easy because we are experts in that. But creating the high stakes exam, that was tricky. And so they did the best they could, said they needed help. We hired external experts in the area of exams and the data that would come out of that so that they got help. So that the experts worked directly with that team as they modified what the high stakes exam would look like if it wasn't a portfolio project. And that is really, then they were able to launch it. They looked at the data on pass rate, success rate, student satisfaction. They went back, iterated, worked with the experts again and said, you know, here's where we're having problems. So while I, as a leader, oversee it, they were the ones doing the work, looking at the data, really stepping up to be accountable because they cared. They weren't forced to participate in the task force. That it was a volunteer basis. We did pay faculty a stipend and the staff, they did that on their staff time. A lot of CSU Global's faculty are part-time, so that's why, you know, but where they're interested, where they have expertise, makes absolute sense to engage them. And so highly motivated teams that's an example of how that engages at that level.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Becky. I think very, very helpful. There's one for Mr. Brook as well, especially around, you spoke about expansion, right? So of growing from 2 to 75 universities. And, the curiosity is around what were your key learnings, right? And what enabled you to grow so quickly? Yes, there was the externality of COVID, right? But as you stepped through and the technology, right? What were the customizations? Was there anything specific about Africa, right? If you could shed some light on that. Mr. Brook? While we wait for him to connect, there's also a question for Dr. Bandar, right? And maybe we can go to that one and we can come back. Right. So the question more around, you spoke about the importance of vocational education in the overall set for Saudi and the ambition to get to 40% by 2024, right? Now, and that in the context of e-learning, right? What have you seen as NCAA and eTech, right? How is vocational education being powered by e-learning, and what are the trends that you see that will enable this going forward?
Yeah, that's a very important question. What happened is when the e-learning is nowadays is booming. There's establishment of a National E-Learning Center under the umbrella of Ministry of Education, where they license. What they check, as I mentioned also in the presentation, they check also the facility and are they able to deliver the e-learning in a fashion a platform that also will help the students. Then when it comes to us, we look for quality. What we look at as some programs, that's when we talk about vocational, it's not just about technical part or mechanical part, electronics. They also learn a lot of things other than that. So we developed standards for e-learning and also distance learning. And those standards will help also to enhance and encourage programs to apply and to be accredited. For example, the university who is hosting us here, the Saudi Electronic University, they're fully electronic e-learning university, and they're following also the standards of e-learning, and that's one of the examples of the work that we're doing.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bandar, for clarifying. Let me go back to Mr. Brook. Did you get the question, or should you?
Yes, I did get the question. I was actually trying to answer.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, not to worry. the challenges of going from a few universities, a handful of universities, to 75 and growing daily, it comes down to understanding each region, understanding the complexities of delivering in different mindsets, right? So technology is easy, but I think human beings, we make it difficult, just like my current experience with my new iMac and Zoom, right? Because I'm used to certain integrations working, and technology does definitely make us lazy after a while. Overall, what we found is that professors wanted to be liberated in terms of learning management systems and also curriculum design. So we created a platform that allows them to do so and to move away with as much bureaucracy as possible. So one of the ingeniouses that we found that was going throughout not just the continent of Africa, but also I know this from partners in the Middle East, is a lot of professors went quickly to recording courses or their lectures, uploading on YouTube and creating a chat room through WhatsApp, which was, a quick fix, but to create a repository of content and so forth was the key part for us. So, yeah, so the challenge always is translating technology and vice.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
No, you're welcome.
A last question for maybe Dr. Christina, right? Especially around, you spoke about lifelong learning, the systemic approach, and being responsible all throughout, right? Lifelong learning and e-learning go very closely hand in hand. And as you think about what has happened in the last 2 years, the acceleration, right? You spoke about some of these. The question is, what are the 2 or 3 big trends or challenges that we should keep in mind, that we should design towards to mitigate as we step through the next age of e-learning for Saudi?
Thank you very much for your question. I would say if you would start with the lifelong learning in general, it's important, and that refers us back to my presentation, to start thinking about the desired outcomes, what you want from a particular course or educational offer, and only then to think about the solution. So not staying from technology, from e-learning, because if we automatically attach e-learning already to lifelong learning, we kind of start thinking from solutions first, and that's exactly what I'm trying to advise not to do. So lifelong learning should take still different forms, and it could be massively digital, and it becomes quite effective. We see it, and we improve the progress in time, and we see that also the quality, the level, how digital courses are being given is increasing rapidly. So there is a big future for digital solutions for lifelong learning, that's for sure. But I'm just trying to illustrate that lifelong learning should not be viewed exclusively as something digital, and it can also be, of course, a physical thing as well. And then once you know exactly what you want to achieve with each of the ways or each of the parts of the trajectory in learning, only then you start thinking back and translating into each of those elements of the framework that I was also presenting. So thinking about what is the best learning environment, what is the best delivery mechanism, who are the best collaboration partners for a specific part of the course, for example. But now I'm talking more from the perspective of education and training providers, and from the perspective of learners. It's all about the change in the mindset, because we notice that we still need to do a lot of work to make sure that people have this lifelong learning mindset, and that they just accept the fact that whatever they know now, it quickly becomes obsolete, it quickly becomes outdated, and they need to, advance themselves on a regular basis. So that's a mentality shift, which may be much more difficult to tackle than technical solutions, and all the infrastructure around it. So we need to figure out the way how to have this shift in mind.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Very, very good. Very pertinent. Right. Thanks, Dr. Christina. I think that's it. Let me wind this up. Thanks again to all the panelists for your valuable time and insights, and taking the time to answer the questions. Hopefully, the audience takes away a couple of takeaways on what it takes to lead change, right? Especially in this economy, right? It has created the impetus for e-learning, and what we need to make sure is that we have the guardrails to make sure that the momentum keeps going and we don't scale it back because we are back to, we're getting back to the old normal kind of, right? So thanks again, everyone, and thank you for your time.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to our final GTEL talk for today. We're very pleased to welcome Mr. Thomas Jepson, who is the president at Simplicity Corporation. Welcome, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure being with you. I'm beaming in from Aix-en-Provence in France. And first of all, a huge thank you to SEU for putting on such a fantastic GTEL event. Been very lucky to sit in remotely and follow some of the sessions, and most definitely taking a lot away. And it's a real honor to be able to address the group today here towards the end. My name is Thomas. I've been president for Simplicity International since 2017. Simplicity is a global student experience platform leader. Prior to that, I was working 15 years for Blackboard, was VP of EMEA. So have quite good knowledge in terms of EdTech, deployment strategies, etc. when it comes to Saudi Arabia. And I think it was with these two hats, I wanted to share a few ideas with you, right? And particularly, I wanted to pitch you on an opportunity for e-learning deanships and leaders to take a key role in raising the bar a little bit outside of the current remit they have, right? So that's going to be the focus of the next 10 minutes. I think we can all agree that we have gone through a tremendous amount of change. And I see the agenda has talked a lot about this over the last 3 years, in the last 3 days. And we can also agree that we are not done dealing with uncertainty, right? However, I think it was extremely positive in Saudi Arabia, the way you guys dealt with COVID. E-learning had such a positive impact, right? And it was instrumental, in terms of how you managed to overcome the crisis. And I think really being sure that e-learning continued. And I think one of the things I take away from looking at this from outside was this courage and an early mover in assuring a national provision, which I guess has been in place for the last 10 years, right? So that meant when truth came and there was an issue, everybody had e-learn provisions, they could continue learning, etc. Right? So I think that was just formidable. In many other places, that was not the case, right? That resulted in panic buying. It resulted in systems not really delivering and degrading the student experience, right? Which is not desirable. So here, I must say, I really see you as leaders with very, very much hands-on experience. And herein lie my challenge to you, right? But before I get to the real challenge, let me just talk about some of the 4 things I think we need to overcome together, and then get back to my conclusion. First of all, I think we're all familiar with the Vision 2030. Very extensive strategy, but what I take out of it is as a crux is that it's very, very important that we're able to make the students ready for the workplace, right? We need to be sure we enhance the capabilities to address national development requirements, at the same time meet labor market demands. And to support this drive, we need to be sure we can expand vocational training, increase women's participation in the labor market, and very importantly as well, nurture and support innovation and entrepreneurship culture, right? So I think that's a very key thing we need to put in the back of our minds. Secondly, it's all about aligning the stakeholders, right? We have 4 key stakeholders. We have the learners, the alumni, we have the market, the companies, we have universities, obviously, we have the regulators and the influencers. And I think here, if we're not totally in sync, if we are not all aligned on expectations and how we all need to work together, it will go a little bit left, it'll go a little bit right, and we will most definitely not meet the ambitions we have, and it will take much longer time than the time horizon we have in front of us, right? So I think alignment is very important. The last panel talked about lifelong learning. Well, lifelong learning to me as well is the cornerstone of this. The learner's path is not linear anymore. You will have students coming to you from, many different ages, very different backgrounds, and you need to cater for all of them. You cannot leave anybody behind. That's important, right? I was with Martin Bean at RMIT, president of RMIT, and we were discussing a little bit about skills development. And the research they've done in Australia is that skills development for them only has a shelf life around 4 years. Then you need to upskill again. So it's not just having a student come back to you once or alumni come back to you once. It's like that would be a continuous experience, right? So that will need a lot of flexibility and almost like a circular strategy. The last thing I think I want to touch upon here is then the systems. We need to assure we embark on the right systems and organization so we can do something at scale, right? So we can really be able to deal with those challenging requirements. And in that, the ABCs here, obviously, we need to allow for common standards, right? We need to be sure we have reporting oversight across all activities and teams, efficiencies from standardizations, while at the same time providing high touch to the students, individualized experiences, and very important as well, mobility for students and staff, right? So with these 4 things in mind, I kind of like take a step back. I look at the overview, almost like you can see on the screen right now, the scorecard, I would call it. And it's clear to me that e-learning teams and leaders, for me, in the Saudi context, are the best place to start driving and incubate an enterprise strategy towards developing human capital, right? To have an incubation of a play which is at an enterprise level and not just at a single department level, right? I think that's a very interesting step. In my eyes, the leaders in this area today are simply the best positioned because they've shown great innovation, showed great execution, and they've shown this at scale. And that is what I tried to say in my introduction. This is really what we've seen throughout COVID, right? That the lights were kept on. I think furthermore, you had the attributes to deal with all of the stakeholders, which I just mentioned before, right? So you already deal with them in many areas of what you do and your strategies on a daily basis, such as, embrace digital transformation, drive innovation at scale, support lifelong learning strategies, and enable data-driven assessment tracking, right? So this is why, for me, you are in a great position to be the first conductor of this train. That being said, of course, e-learning deanship cannot do human capital development alone. We need many more partners and systems to be involved to succeed, right? It goes without saying. It becomes part of a overall university strategy, but it needs to start somewhere. And I think if you look at some of the external and internal partners here, these are the ones we need to work with, right? But I think if e-learning sits in the center of this, you kind of like are not replacing anybody. You're not the owners, but you are a key player, I would like to say, right? By putting yourself in the center, you can act as the glue and the bridge to this entire ecosystem, which in the end will allow the university to develop an ecosystem which is very rich, very high touch in all aspects of human capital development, right? And it'll give the students the key services they need to develop their work-based skills and become successful assets in the Saudi economy. And I think that is what is really all about. So I think to conclude, and sorry for speaking a bit fast, but I definitely wanted to stay within the 10 minutes allocated. I'm very thankful for this. Let me just finish by saying that I think these are very exciting times in our industry with so many possibilities to enhance the student experience and outcomes, which will benefit the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. E-learning teams, you should take your current momentum you've had through COVID and become a key player, key leader, and step up in supporting human capital development in Saudi Arabia. I think it's a great challenge for you, and I think you'll succeed, right? There's probably little doubt that I see you guys a little bit at the industry superheroes, but you need to remember, with great superpowers come great responsibility, right? And personally, I'll be looking forward to watching this space and supporting you wherever I can. So with that, I thank you for your time. Once again, I thank SEU for a fantastic GTEL. It's really been inspirational, and good conclusion and good end of the event. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum jami'an. It gives me great pleasure to introduce for our closing talk the Saudi Electronic University Vice President for Graduate Studies and Scientific Research, Dr. Muhammad Al-Awardi. تفضل دكتور.
Assalamu alaikum, مساء الخير. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, our attendees and viewers, as we end today's sessions and come to the end of our forum for this year, I would like to thank you all for joining us. Your presence shows a strong commitment to promote knowledge exchange and explore future developments related to e-learning. Many valuable insights and messages were discussed at GTEL over 3 days. The following are some highlights and recommendations on this year GTEL, with over 4,000 registrants and participants from around the world, from over 20 countries, and over 70,000 views on Twitter. We've had from over 40 prominent policy experts and academics and tech minds and developers pushing the envelope in e-learning and expanding the horizons in pedagogy, teaching, student engagement, experience, and assessment. We have 6 fascinating panel discussions, 6 inspiring talks, and 5 interactive workshops. We've had 50 entities and companies exhibiting their ideas and platforms and achievements in GTEL Virtual Expo, which is running until the end of March, which we encourage you to explore. Also, we've had recommendations to the future explore the potential applications of artificial intelligence in e-learning to make it more granular, personal, and interactive. To dedicate efforts as educators to understand how students learn differently and embrace that diversity with differentiated educational practices, especially in the light of COVID-19 pandemic and the shifts we have seen in the needs of learners, and include elements that support all types of learners, even those with disabilities and other challenges. To appreciate and work towards classroom analytics techniques to detect and diagnose what students learn, building responses and learning systems on the data, making the invisible visible. To go further and explore not only what learners do, but how they behave and adapting curricula according to what classrooms is digitally ecosystems, and students become the generators of information and insights. The importance of reintegrating learners and assessment by making the learning process, the process of self-assessment using computer games and many other ethic methods and techniques. Understanding that some of the best technology is a technology that's invisible, supporting the learner in the background without distracting. The talks we had in GTEL and the panel discussions were highly engaging, the perspectives diverse and enriching, the discussions valuable and informative, and provided significant building blocks, deriving the expansion and the development of collaborative working in the realm of e-learning. At the end, my deepest thanks for executive and organizing committees for their intense effort and contribution over the past weeks and months in making this a successful event. And thank you to all of our viewers and attendees for taking part. And we are looking forward to seeing you in the next GTEL forum in 2023, inshallah. Thank you all.